Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. I think we can all agree that there's been way too much attention given to Charlie the Klansman Kirk. In the meanwhile, we've got important things that actually need to be discussed, like what we're owed. Reparations matters, but we need to also make sure that we correct people and make certain that our interests don't get diluted by people who, truth be told, just don't get it. Reparations matters because it's political truth serum. It's something that you can't tiptoe around. It's so direct and dangerous to white supremacy that you simply cannot give a half answer to it. Either you're for it or against it. There's no middle road. Reparations also separates the real from the phony. It separates those who stand from those who bow down and bend over. If you actually for real believe in black empowerment and don't just say it occasionally or don't just say it in a rhetorical sense, then reparations is a subject we're merely bringing it up as a threat to white comfort. And if your true goal is to make white power comfortable around you, then you won't even want to say you're in favor of reparations. You can't even afford to get close to it because you know that it threatens the position of white society that you're trying to get in good with. Believe it or not, reparations is not the only big demand that the black grassroots is making, though it is unique in that reparations strikes directly at the very heart of the racial order in America. Dr. King himself addressed it, that the discussions on race didn't make white people too uncomfortable as long as it was merely about desegregating lunch counters and movie theaters. But now we're at the point where there's no escaping that there must be billions of dollars reallocated in order to address the problem, and now we're seeing where people actually stand. And it's not the amount of the money that's the problem, family. When the white right was whipping up hysteria about welfare mothers and such, spreading racialist fear-mongering as if Bushika and her 4 kids were somehow bankrupting America, the welfare state was destroying the economy and needed to be done away with. Meanwhile, corporate America was getting huge subsidies that are orders of magnitude larger than whatever welfare recipients get. And yet these same bottom feeders on the white right are never in an uproar about that. And perhaps that's because the individuals who fund, control, and organize the white right are these same corporate interests. So the problem isn't that black people are demanding billions of dollars that we're owed. That's not the problem. Lots of people in constituencies demand billions of dollars and get it. The problem, as always, is that black people are the ones making the demand. That's the problem. The only problem. Anytime we demand anything, suddenly we begin hearing screaming that it's some sort of ridiculous and absurd demand. Take defund the police, for example. That wasn't black people demanding money, it was black people saying, let's stop spending so much money. But it's exactly the fact that black people were saying it that made it the problem. Because when the FBI got on the wrong side of the orange man, you had the white right shrieking and yelling that we need to defund the FBI. Yeah, all of a sudden they didn't have a problem defunding law enforcement so long as they were the ones making the demand. And a number of these anti-reparations critics are black themselves. Now you want to hear something interesting? Most reparations critics do not dare say that we are not owed reparations. Ever notice that? How can you object to reparations on any grounds without saying black people are not owed it? They never say that. In all of their gibberish about what they claim to be against on reparations, none of them says, well, black people aren't even owed it. Instead, their objections always takes the form of one of 2 talking points. First, black people would just waste the money. Now, have you ever heard a civil defense attorney tell a judge or jury, yes, I admit that my client is liable for harming the plaintiff, and I admit that the plaintiff is owed, but my client shouldn't have to pay because the plaintiff will just waste the money? Have you ever heard any civil defense attorney try that one? Of course not. Nobody said that when the Red Indians were demanding reparations. Nobody said that when Japanese Americans were demanding reparations, and they didn't whine about the amount either. And yet that's what a number of these clowns do with us. And the main reason, in fact, the only reason that these black reparations opponents ever give for why they oppose reparations is because they say they don't think it will ever happen. In fact, that is the only reason that any black person gives to why they quote-unquote oppose reparations. Their opposition is never rooted in black people were never done any wrong, so black people aren't owed. Not one of them, even the most brain dead, would even try that. How stupid do you have to be to say, I agree reparations is owed, but I don't think white people will support reparations, so I oppose it. Not because I think it's wrong, but because I don't think it has enough white support. By the way, these black reparations critics will also champion a number of pet issues of the white right or the white left or both. And they'll support these things even though the public doesn't support them, and they don't care how blatantly unrealistic those things are. The Myron Gaines, the Candace Owens, the A. Dummies, and others, these same black clowns who oppose reparations would never say, yes, the Israelis are carrying out a genocide, but you know what? I oppose cutting off U.S. aid to Israel because I think the Israeli lobby is simply too strong, too organized, and, well, cutting them off will just never happen. It's unrealistic. They would never say that. At least there's been some phony, insincere, blatantly fraudulent gestures which the white media has lied and claimed are reparations, even though they clearly aren't. But even these empty, meaningless gestures are a far sight better than anything that's been done to rein in Israel. And yet not one of these black reparations critics has ever said that cutting off military aid to Israel should be opposed because it's unrealistic. They don't talk about how the Israeli lobby has DC on lock. The politicians are all in Netanyahu's pocket, so cutting off that funding is unrealistic. No, when it comes to their objections to what Israel's doing, they don't care how unrealistic it is. On that, none of these black reparations critics ever says the U.S. and Israel are boldly defying the American people and the international community. But you know what? No matter how many speeches people give, nobody's going to go to war to protect the Palestinians, so it's unrealistic to think that Israel's going to stop. And as a result, I oppose any efforts to cut off funding for Israel, not because I think the Israelis are right, but I oppose cutting them off because I think it's unrealistic. AIPAC's lobbying game is simply too tight. When it comes to everyone else, everybody stands on principle regardless of any alleged feasibility. It's only when you come to us that these self-hating Negroes suddenly want to talk about some asinine standard of realistic or unrealistic based on what everyone else thinks. It's not based on what's right, it's based on what everyone else thinks. Let's put it to an opinion poll. That's because their true goal is to have a comfortable place under white supremacy, and they don't want to do anything that would threaten that. That's their real motivation. That's what their real objection is. To say in one breath that you believe something is justified, but in the very next breath to say that you're against it because you don't think it's going to happen, that's crazy talk. That is literally the definition of cognitive dissonance. And yet this is exactly where virtually all of these black reparations opponents are coming from. This is their entire rationale for opposing reparations. No cure for stupid. And none of these clowns ever tells you what pro-black position they are in favor of. You ever notice that? It would be one thing if they opposed reparations but had some equally bold proposal that they were in favor of, like a black state or something. I can disagree with their position and their reasoning or lack thereof, but at least I could respect it if they had a demand. Hell, even if it was a small one. But these reparation critics, they don't even go that far. They don't demand anything on our behalf. Nothing at all. Show me someone who criticizes reparations, and I'll show you someone who has a little white supremacist residing in their empty head. And why not? There's plenty of room. So these reparations opponents are not opponents at all. They're just cowardly, scared, and conniving scumbags who are trying to suck up to a non-black audience, and this is their pathetic way of trying to build credibility and support among that non-black audience that they want to accrue. These same individuals will claim to be such free thinkers that these guys, they don't think like the rest of the black community, they think for themselves. But they can't even explain why they oppose something that they themselves admit is fully justified, valid, and necessary. To oppose reparations, you have to show where the basis for the reparations argument is false. No one can do that. So there's no grounds to oppose it. If someone is saying that reparations is not realistic, be sure to ask them what is the alternative. Because they won't be able to give you one. Every other group makes big demands. Every other group never tells their advocates that something is unrealistic. If someone's proposing something and there's something in it for them, then they're for it. And they don't ask what everybody else thinks. Without fail, show me someone who calls reparations unrealistic, and I'll show you someone who isn't making any demands for black people at all. They'll be advocating for immigrants, for Gaza, for unions, for the man on the moon. They'll be demanding big policy changes for everyone else, but never anything for us. These people want to try to be some sort of de-racialized mouthpieces. They resort to the pathetic respectability politics, but in most cases, these are the blame black people crowd. They don't want to advocate for black people to get anything. Show me someone who's cheerleading against reparations, and I'll show you someone who is only trying to advocate for themselves. They're trying to finesse a bag, usually as some sort of half-brained financial guru or some sort of life coach, which is the same thing, and they want to appeal to as many non-black people as possible, because that's where the money is, as they see it. This is where idiots like A Dummy come from. I posted a great takedown video that our brother Mad Black Man, aka Chris Crazy House, did about that clown. A Dummy attacks reparations because he's trying to run the financial advisor hustle. I hope that moron pays his taxes, because that's usually where a lot of these advisors get themselves in trouble. Maybe they should take their own advice. Or was that the entire problem? But no, family, reparations is not unrealistic, because there's been plenty of other groups who have gotten reparations for things nowhere near as severe as what we've suffered. And there's other groups from the LGBT to some immigrants who have been making similar demands, who these black reparations critics never decide that they're going to criticize. Everyone knows that when it comes to black people, we're the ones who encounter the greatest and most aggressive opposition whenever we make any kind of demand, because anti-black racism is the foundation of the American social order. And that order is based on systematically and intentionally depriving us, and only us, of resources, putting black people at the bottom and trying to make sure that it's engineered that we remain there. You cannot maintain the racial pecking order without maintaining and reinforcing anti-black poverty, and everyone knows it. These other groups come here, and they already know that so long as they're not black, this racist system will hand them things simply because. They all know that we've been targeted for financial impoverishment, that we have been locked out of the very wealth that our uncompensated labor made possible. And as these other groups see it, their goal is to claim as much of it for themselves before anyone can stop them. They have the mentality of thieves, or as your world put it, thieves and opportunists. So don't listen to any moron who's attacking our right and duty to make huge demands. These are the same idiots who will tell you that part of getting a higher salary is that you gotta make a demand for it. That part of negotiations is you stake out an opening position that is enormous so that you can move your opponent closer to what you want. They talk that way about any and everything else under the sun except for what black people need. Then all of a sudden, it's not realistic. Same way that ending chattel slavery was unrealistic. Same way crushing Jim Crow was unrealistic. Same way that forcing the thugs in blue to finally be punished was unrealistic. See, these clowns and self-interested professional BS artists always say that anything we demand is unrealistic, right up until the moment it happens. But you never see them making demands for us. Anytime they open their mouths, they talk about every Fox News fraud you ever saw. To hear them tell it, race isn't really a problem at all, and that's because they're trying to appeal to a wide audience. You keep demanding reparations, that's going to make their would-be customers uncomfortable. So understand what's going on here. You ask these con artists, do black people have any needs or necessities of our own? And they'll say yes. Well, some of them will say yes. But when you ask them what is it that black people need, either they can't tell you or they give you some answer that sounds like it came from the DNC or RNC talking points. Nothing that would actually change the racial status quo. Just the same old stale canned talking points. That's what they offer. You cannot change a deeply entrenched system with modest proposals and half measures. You do it through bold actions, game-changing actions. If you're not doing that, then you're not serious. But then again, these naysayers aren't serious. They decided a long time ago that they would try to finesse the system, and they're still at it. They decided a long time ago that they would not advocate for black people, which is why I cannot stand the whole gender war crap. I was the person who did the definitive video essay about the gender war, RIP Black America. You want to know why I only made one video like that? Because I recognized over 17 years ago that the people who were passing that video around the most were people who were the least interested in black empowerment. These people wanted to psychologically masturbate about why they can't get a date on Friday night, and these people also were trying to escape blackness. Gender warring was their way of doing that. These are people basically doing the male equivalent of the whole black feminine routine. Well, I'm not trying to escape blackness, and I recognize the reality that anti-black racism is the biggest problem that we face. See, it's easy to talk about gender because it doesn't require you to displease someone who you want to get money from. Black people bickering amongst themselves about gender is no threat to the dominant society, and hence no threat to whatever paycheck these people are hoping to get or think they've already gotten from some non-black customer. And to think some of these fools use terms like community nonetheless. They don't want a community, because nowhere do they talk about building one. And if you're going to build a community, you're going to need resources for that and control of the politics of the areas in which you live. What do those crucial things have to do with gender warring? How does gender warring build wealth? Any black person who is so dishonest and cowardly that they don't dare admit to the racial reality of America is someone who will stab you in the back. And they always do, by the way. See, while these critics of reparations and any other big demands we make are only too happy to distance themselves from black people's demands, these white audiences they're trying to appeal to are not bashful about demanding that their unearned and undeserved place in the world remain intact at our expense. They're not at all worried about making us uncomfortable or displeasing us. Don't listen to someone who refuses to challenge power. The dummies of this world crawl on their bloated, obese bellies begging white daddy for crumbs. And you know what? That's where they belong, on their bellies, like a dog. But if you want to stand on your own 2 feet like a man or woman, then you already know that means standing up for yourself and demanding what you require, no matter who doesn't like it. Under white supremacy, there's only one of two positions. Either you're trying to bring white power down, or you're trying to protect it. Just like with reparations, there's no third way. You can't actually oppose reparations and claim it's justified, which is why these sniveling, boot-licking, butt-kissing sellouts don't even try. Instead, they just hide behind the Bernie Sanders deflection. Well, it's not feasible. By the way, notice these reparations critics never talk about how there's cities around the country who have done their own phony baloney pretend reparations. They never bring that into the conversation. They don't even mention that because it would disprove their talking point to be a lie. Any other group who had something like that happen, they would be on the warpath saying, hey, you did it at the city level, now you got to do it at the national level. Jews didn't stop with one Holocaust reparations payout. They've just kept on demanding more and more from Germany and every other country in Europe who they felt were involved in the Holocaust, and then eventually they began demanding Holocaust benefits from the United States, which had nothing to do with it. They didn't get what they originally wanted, so they kept pushing until they did, and they weren't bothered in the slightest by who didn't like it. It's an undeniable fact that if you want to find a comfortable place under white supremacy, then you must enter into a deal with the devil, and that means totally ignoring the devil's foul, pale deeds, and it also means placing one's faith totally in the devil. When it comes to black people, you must start off from a place of contempt and disdain. But how much worse is it when the person who's expressing this contempt and disdain is black themselves? It's something that our enemies like the alt-right and the Chris Rufos and other assorted trash understand, believe it or not. They support all kinds of asinine policies, even things that are injurious to them because, as they put it, it will drive the left crazy. For them, that's all the reason they need to support something. They push policies that even their own constituents warn them about in many cases, simply because their own enemies won't like it. Well, here we are with a policy that does benefit us, that does empower us, that does weaken our enemies, that does strengthen us at their expense. And you have black people who are fighting against it. We should support reparations if for no other reason than that our enemies hate it. It drives them absolutely nuts. And that alone is all the reason any intelligent black person should ever need to support reparations. But of course, these black reparations critics never speak up for anything on our behalf. How many of them have said even a peep about an anti-black hate crime law? None of them brings that up. Now, are they going to say that black people don't need it? Of course not. Instead, what would they say? What they would say is, well, when you think about it, why can't we just have crimes? Why does it have to be a hate crime? I mean, after all, assault is assault, right? Regardless of the motive, something they would never say and do not say to anyone else. So the next time you hear some empty-headed fool calling themselves saying, well, I don't support reparations because I don't think that it's going to happen. I just don't think it's going to happen. So that's the reason why I don't support it. Let them know that if they think they're going to be respected by the black community for acting like a coward, then they're the ones who are being unrealistic. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Mark Anderson, Wally Bilal, Sakina Collins, Devin Goodwin, and Tori Evans. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.